This is Julia James Davis, and welcome to The War on Beauty. Western civilization was birthed by the Catholic Church, and it's what's going to save it. But more precisely, Western civilization was birthed by individuals within the Catholic Church, which therein lies both the problem and the solution. The answer to the macro is in the micro. We look around now and often feel discouraged by the magnitude of our problems, institutional and cultural crises that seem so dire and huge and insurmountable that we feel like we cannot possibly fix or change anything. From mass migration making cities unrecognizable, the attack on the family, the proliferation of abortion, endless wars, and the rapidly deteriorating state of our mental, physical, and spiritual health. What's up is down, and what's down is up in this topsy-turvy state of affairs. And it really seems like it's all over, a plan set in motion by the powers that be, and we are powerless to stop it or to do anything about it. But this is precisely the wrong view to take. History shows us that civilization has been saved by the commitment of single individuals, even individuals with no worldly power, usually in much worse situations than ours as well, through their devotion, their gumption, and their acceptance of huge responsibility. This big war, which is really a war that's been happening forever, we're not in a unique situation actually, is fought on the individual level, and so the solution lies on the individual level. So this is something I'm always thinking about. What are the solutions to the seemingly huge crises in our world today, especially in the context of the war on beauty? So it was really amazing when this week I received in the mail a homily from the Institute of Christ the King by their prior, Monsignor Gilles Walk. And I hope that's how you say his name. And usually I don't think I've ever done this, read something that I get mailed, but I had a moment of free time and it was sitting right in front of me on my dining room table. So I decided, hey, why not? Let me just read it. And I was so blown away by what it said. This homily was for the feast day of Saint Benedict, and it says, "We complain a great deal about our times, and perhaps it is not an exaggeration to say that we truly have some reason to complain. Yet those who believe that the past never offered anything comparable to our present miseries would be mistaken. Gravely mistaken. The truth is that there have always been difficult times, and perhaps even harder than ours." He continues, "Saint Benedict lived in a time of turmoil and hatred. Europe was ravaged, torn apart by barbarian invasions. Political and social order no longer existed. All this favored the growth of vice. Religion itself, the final bond when everything falls apart, the last hope when all else collapses. Religion itself, amid the chaos of heresies and schisms of Arianism, both in the West and in the East, seemed to be sliding into premature decay." So that's all so interesting, but here comes the crucial point. It was Saint Benedict and his establishment of a Western monasticism who literally, Monsignor Walk says, saved civilization in this dark age. Paralleling to our present situation, he says, "So fear not, dear friends, we are not yet living in a post-Christian era. The great light will shine again after the eclipse. Peace will succeed war, and triumph will come at last after apparent defeat. It will be enough for some providential man to arise at God's call. A genius, that is not necessary. A Caesar, that is not necessary. A saint like the old monk whose feast we are celebrating, that may suffice. So when the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, the Western world really descended into some of the most tumultuous times: fragmentation, warfare, as it came under barbarian rule. The great progress of ancient philosophy, art, architecture, and order were over, and whatever remnant of that era remained was under threat of just being totally lost and destroyed. Schools were closed, urban centers declined, literacy rates plummeted, and classical education and knowledge were basically abandoned. But in 529 AD, Saint Benedict founded the monastery at Monte Cassino, and he wrote the Rule of Saint Benedict, which would become the foundation of all Western monasticism. And this exact environment was what was needed to create a stable community in order to preserve what was good of ancient culture. Specifically, the Benedictine monasteries built scriptoria, writing rooms. In this system, the writings of the church fathers from St. Augustine to St. Jerome were preserved and copied. So it was in these monasteries, as established by a single man, Saint Benedict, that the small flame of civilization kept burning until another individual came along to grow it bigger: Charlemagne. In 768 AD, Charlemagne, the first Holy Roman Emperor, came to power, and he was the pivotal individual in civilizing Europe and really re-civilizing it and ordering it under a unified Christendom. Under Charlemagne, the faith was standardized with correct doctrine and liturgy throughout the empire, and he also built educational infrastructure using the monastic system and cathedrals that really revived classical and Christian learning, all while continuing to preserve and copy ancient texts. So the Carolingian Empire built upon the foundation laid by Saint Benedict, and together they helped to give rise to the Western civilization that we know today. But it's not just them. Throughout history, we see these great individuals making decisive contributions to civilization. Consider, for example, Abbot Suger, who came 300 years after Charlemagne. Suger was one of the first great patrons, curators, and collectors of the arts, and in his building of the Abbey at Saint Denis, he literally started the Gothic style. Suger's work emerged from a deep understanding that beauty is a great civilizer, and that it brings us before the face of God. Suger said, "The dull mind rises to truth through that which is material." Under Suger's vision and direction, Saint Denis would be the first in the long line of great cathedrals dotted throughout Europe, from Chartres to Amiens to Cologne. And his understanding of the evangelizing power and the civilizing power of beauty would underscore the great artworks to come, the great artworks that we now associate with Western civilization. Which here we should pause and understand something really crucial, especially as it relates to the war on beauty, which was the importance of beauty for these great civilizers. They understood from Saint Benedict to Abbot Suger that we become like what we contemplate, that beauty is formative not only for our personalities, but for our souls. For example, the Benedictines didn't just copy texts, but they made books of the utmost beauty that were works of art in and of themselves. And also Charlemagne deeply understood the important role that beauty plays in creating a kingdom and forming a political empire. And in the case of Abbot Suger, when a medieval peasant would enter one of these Gothic cathedrals, the experience that they would have been so overwhelmingly beautiful. Truly an experience of heaven on earth, which is what beauty is. The individual was being lifted up and made better through beauty, and shown the serious reality of the eternal, of God, which is exactly why the assault on beauty in our present day society and culture is an assault on civilization itself. We truly do become suppressed, disordered, and uncivilized. But I digress. We'll circle back to that point. The common thread between these three great men was an extreme seriousness and an unshakable devotion to Christ and his church, and a commitment to learning about and preserving the past. Then, through their conviction and zeal, they unified and rallied others, which resulted in the building of the greatest civilization brick by brick, which was no small feat. So you can probably infer what point I'm going to make next, which is that we are nothing like this today. In fact, we might actually be the abject, absolute opposite of what these men were. And every effort is made that we don't grow in these great civilizing virtues. Everything from the outside is programming us to be unserious, fragmented, lazy, Philistine, and superficial. So as the individual deteriorated to this state in the modern, postmodern era, so has the state alongside it, resulting in what appears to be the downfall of Western civilization. Plato says in Republic, the elements and traits that belong to a state must also exist in the individuals that compose it. There is nowhere else for them to come from. So in that way, we ourselves are many states. We're many civilizations, and the barbarians are at our gates. Pornography, slop food, slop entertainment, divisive politics, ugly art, immorality, and distraction of every kind. So while on the one hand, things are decaying as a result of this unserious, uncommitted, indifferent attitude that's taken over, on the other, there has grown this outright hostility to the beautiful foundational institutions that built and are the foundation of our society. Which brings me to my central point. Because we as individuals are the microcosm of this bigger manifested situation, we have to look at the ways that we might have been complicit, even if it's in a subtle attitude of unseriousness or indifference about life, because we are not going to get out of this unless we all personally kick it into gear. As the homily said, the answer doesn't lie in a genius or a politician to come along, but it lies in the committed, devoted individual like Saint Benedict. You are the revolution, re-civilize yourself, and save Western civilization. We can actually take practical steps every single day towards this, which is first and foremost a major activation of self through the church, through the sacraments, abiding by Catholic moral teachings, and really praying the rosary every day. I truly believe that that is the answer to everything. This is really the foundation on which everything else is going to be built. Just like the monasteries were first and foremost places of prayer and worship of God, your personal re-civilization has to begin with the establishment of a relationship with God, Jesus, and Mary, and the Holy Spirit. So it's really the church and our devotion. But next is intellectual formation. Because just like the Benedictines had their scriptoria, you also need to become a guardian of truth, beauty, and goodness in yourself by reading great books, studying the church fathers, studying philosophy, theology, and classical tradition, all of these things which our church did preserve for us. Then we can help transmit that to other people as well. Next is aesthetic cultivation, which is following Abbot Suger's example of surrounding yourself with beauty. That means, which I know that's really hard with the world that we live in, but you can just start by going to the museum, going to a beautiful coffee shop, or even in your home, bringing flowers or making it beautiful in some small way. This is important. You have to create the beauty in your own life, and that is also in the way that you dress, in the way that you carry yourself, your manners. Beauty should not be a luxury, but it's really necessary for your soul's health. Finally, the practice of excellence. whatever your calling or what you do in your life, whether you're a mom or you're a teacher or you're a businessman or a tradesman, whoever you are, approach your work with the same seriousness and dedication that the great civilizers brought to their vocations. And this is truly how civilizations are built, not necessarily through mass movements or political campaigns, but through the transformation of committed individuals that transform their families and then their communities and then institutions and the world. The monastery at Monte Cassino seemed like a small thing, but it saved Western civilization. So you cannot underestimate the impact that your personal contribution to just living your own life in the best way can have on the world. So in conclusion, we live in such an important time. It's a time of unprecedented opportunity. Truly, this might be the best time to be living. Never before have people had so much access to the treasures of civilization, from the great books, the sacred music, the architectural masterpieces, and the teachings of the saints. We also have never had such amazing tools of communication and community building, but also we do, on the other hand, of course, live in a time of such unprecedented assault on the human person and on the human soul. So finally, keep the flame of civilization burning in yourself, because quite literally the future of the West depends on it. So I thank you so much for watching in what I think is another long video, but I truly appreciate it, and I hope that you'll please like, comment, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future posts from the War on Beauty.